Welcome to session 15, Grants, Foundations, and Gifts. In this session, we're going to be talking about one of the most important things when you put a proposal together for technology, and that is you have to find the money to do it. And the process that you go through is one of the most important things that anybody who works in grant development really has to have an understanding of. We've lined up some pretty important people today. Not only people who do this for a living, but also people who are in the process from our own class. So today, the first thing we're going to be covering are the steps in the grant development process. We've got a person who does this on an ongoing basis every day. We're going to just take a couple of minutes to talk about dialogue because, as you know, dialogue has been the mainstay of this entire program. All the research for each session was carried out in part on dialogue and under a grant from Dialogue Corporation. We really appreciate that. Also, we have someone that everyone needs to know about. We have Jerry Varner from the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance, and Jerry's going to be talking about what dialogue is and what dialogue is going to be in just a relatively short period of time. We've got two great case studies. Cathrine Hayes, who is here at the university and is part of the Mine Extension University crew, has put together a very, very important case study. And we've got Bob Woods from Winter Park, Florida, one of our students who has put together an idea for youth that we think will make a substantial difference nationally on the whole business of how one really looks at the environment and what you have to do for youth in order to make them realize how important it is. We also have on the show today to help us wrap up Amy Bishop. Amy is another one of our students, and she's going to be looking at this entire series of 15 sessions and at some of the principal points that are really important to us. At this time, we'd like to talk with Matt Grossman. And Matt Grossman is here from the Council of Jewish Federations here in town, but it's a national organization. Matt, why don't you just take a minute or so and tell us the kinds of things you do at the Council before we get into the project that you worked on this year.
I work with the network of Jewish federations across this country, which provides social services to agencies. And what I do is assist them in accessing federal resources to implement the programs that they use to serve populations in need.
Is this kind of activity really important to the Federation?
Certainly it is. Traditional forms of resource development have changed over the past few years and commonly fluctuate as the economy fluctuates. Looking for alternative resources in the terms of foundation gifts, federal government grants, corporation gifts is something that is becoming more and more popular in the whole scope of total financial resource development. So I feel that the government resources are a very substantial place where social service agencies need to tap into potential funding.
Well, you certainly have done that by working with George Washington University this year, Matt, in putting together a Corporation for National and Community Service grant. And I think it's really important that all of us realize exactly what took place and how important this grant was and is to George Washington University and to this whole community in the Washington, D.C. area. It's my understanding that the grant that you wrote and put together has been submitted by George Washington University to the corporation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And when was that submitted, Matt?
It was submitted yesterday afternoon.
Great. Well, why don't you talk through some of the major processes that you went through for this grant, but quite frankly, Matt, you would go through for any kind of grant.
This grant was especially interesting because it came from a new federal program under the Corporation for National and Community Service. This was an initiative by President Clinton to create sort of a domestic Peace Corps to involve students and other American citizens in lasting service opportunities to bring some positive change to this country. And the reason I bring this up is because it was a new program, it used a lot of new concepts in federal grantsmanship. And a lot of those concepts involved using computer technology. There are three areas where I really use computer technology in developing federal resources. Those areas are in accessing information, organizing information, and presenting information. And in accessing information, I sort of split it into two categories. You can access information that could bring potential resources to your program, but also once you've identified what those resources are, there's certain information that you need to access to maximize your ability to get those resources. As you know, the Foundation Center offers a tremendous amount of opportunities to access data through online systems, but the federal government does as well. And one way that they do this is through the Catalog on Federal and Domestic Assistance, which we'll hear about later. And that is sort of a database that contains over 1,300 different federal funding opportunities. Now, the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance is available in a hard copy in a large book and is about 1,500 pages, but it's also available now through the federal government on disk in a DOS text format.
Well, that's great. In fact, there's Jerry Varner, who's going to be with us, who will probably go into some detail on that.
Right. Because it's available in this format, it makes it very easy to create search strategies to access information quickly. But one thing with federal funds that's sort of different from accessing other resources from foundations or corporations is that laws are constantly changing and program requirements are constantly changing. So it does require more of an online type system where you can access information as it changes. The Catalog for Federal Domestic Assistance is issued, I believe, quarterly, but because of the federal government system, regulations can change daily. And a lot of government agencies now are moving to online systems. I know the Department of Education has an online system. FAPRS, which we'll also hear about later, that puts you in touch with the catalog and other federal regulation information, also is accessible online. So really, the catalog is not the only tool you need to access potential resources.
Well, one of the things that we're going to talk about also is using dialogue. We've been very fortunate in this program in having dialogue as a database, and they have actually two parts of it. One is that they have the grants, gifts, and foundations from the private sector, and they also have an incredible amount of background information. So all those things are important in the kinds of job that you did. When you developed this grant, what was the actual process you used to access the information to finally come up with the grant? How did you do that?
Once I recognized the program that we were to pursue, I began to use computer technology to gather background materials on that program. This involved looking to clearinghouses, which could be dialed in online, using computer system to access libraries on latest articles, because this is a new program. Much of the information about the themes and goals of the program were only available in very recent newspaper articles. One way that this program has really, the whole corporation has really used computer technology is through the internet system. They have made all their applications and regulations available through internet, where if you send them a blank message, they will immediately return regulations and forms to you on a particular program.
Is that completely automated?
Completely automated. It's a fastback system. Within 5 minutes of sending your message, it's put through the internet and you receive back regulations. So almost immediately you can dive into the program.
Well, that's pretty interesting. What else did you do to access the information? Did you talk to a lot of people about this?
Certainly. In accessing the information, it's important that experts are identified who are presenting the proper information. There's a ton of commentary about all programs out there, and it's hard to know which commentary can really help you. By being able to look at the most recent articles in various publications about the Corporation on National Service, we were able to identify experts in the field who could really help us with the proposal.
And once you got that information, how did you then organize your proposal and your second step to put it all online?
One, and this sort of revolves around different software programs that I use to develop proposals rather. One program that I used fairly extensively was Microsoft Project. And I know that this was demoed in previous classes, or previous class, where we were able to create a work breakdown structure of exactly what needed to be accomplished to complete the grant on time and accurately. One of the two greatest challenges in federal grantsmanship is making sure, number one, that all the requirements that are laid out by law are met. And that's something that can be very difficult to do because you're drawing them from many sources. You're drawing them from federal regulations, you're drawing them from applications, you're drawing them from priority areas, you're drawing them potentially from conversations that you have with programming officers. So to be able to put that information in one organized format is a challenge, but if you're able to do that, you ensure that the information that you're presenting is the information that the program readers are looking for. So using Microsoft Project was one way to pull this strategy together. And a second thing that must be done is obviously getting the project done on time. There are no extensions through the federal government. And it's a shame to see a lot of hard work go for naught just because time limits can't be met. And by using software, you can really map out what needs to be done and when it needs to be done.
You can also give a copy of that software to the people who are in the project itself. And you can also change it as you go through the project constantly, because there is no such thing as a completely stable project.
Absolutely, and there's actually another way to use it where we were asked to submit a timeline of how we would implement our plan if we received funding. Mm-hmm. So I was able to use Microsoft Project to print out a work breakdown structure and an implementation plan for our particular program. And that actually went into the grant. So that was very helpful.
It also looks pretty nice too, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
Did you use the budget portion of that for as well, or did you just do the budget separately?
Doing the budget and combining a budget with a narrative has been a tough thing in the past. But now with recent advances in the way spreadsheets and word processors integrate data with each other, it's become a much easier task. I tend to do budgets through Microsoft Excel, which is a spreadsheet program. And now with the latest introduction of OLE2, Object Linking and Embedding 2, a spreadsheet can very easily be put into Microsoft Word, which is a word processing program, and be manipulated from within Word, but using the tools from Excel.
It's not just embedded, it's also an active file. So you can actually manipulate the numbers and never leave Word. And
Exactly.
That's how you're doing it.
Exactly. This was a very important piece of technology to come out, and I understand now that the whole Microsoft Office system has this OLE technology. So a database, PowerPoint, can also be linked in with that same kind of manipulation tools.
Makes it very nice, particularly in the grant proposal business, where you'd like to have all the features. You would like to have your text, and you want to have visual. You want to have graphics, images. You want to have your spreadsheet,
Certainly.
And you can put them all in directly from within Word. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Well, that makes it pretty nice. And you use several of these tools within using the same concept when you organized it.
Absolutely. One thing that Word, I mentioned before, that it's very important to get all the information that you need, that needs to go into the proposal, sort of into what I call a grants analysis, where I break the proposal up into its smallest pieces, and under those smallest pieces I put exactly what needs, not necessarily the information itself, but what information or what question must be answered in that particular section of the proposal. So Microsoft Word allowed me to create a template sort of on top of the actual proposal itself, where I can, for example, a section on evaluation, I can, before I begin writing what the proposal needs to include in the evaluation, or writing the evaluation itself, I can put the exact concepts that are listed in the priority areas of the application actually on my file right there. So it sort of guides me through the process of writing the proposal.
Sounds pretty good. Presentation Matt, is very, very important, isn't it?
Sure.
How it looks, and in some cases it's easy because if the federal government has given you the exact format, that makes it a little easy. But even within that format, if you could make a very clean presentation with graphic images and ideas laid out in such a way that they're bold, that they are italics when needed, but they emphasize certain points that you really want to emphasize. This contributes significantly to allowing the user of a project, the person who reads it, the person who has to work with it, to understand it, and it certainly improves your capacity to get a project funded.
Without question.
What are the kinds of things you thought about as you put this together to make sure that it was presented this way?
One thing that I considered was whether or not to use a word processor to publish the document, or whether to use desktop publishing software to do it.
Well, that's interesting. What decision did you make?
I ended up using a word processor, and in the future, I think it really depends on the proposal, but it's kind of a combination between the two. You need some tools from one and some to the other, from the other. And the way to determine this is the tools needed in word processing, I found, were tools that were some of the analytical tools, the spell checking, the grammar checking, the thesaurus, whatever little programs are built in. The headers and footers. I found this to be very important. You're not going to win $1 million grant with spelling errors. There's no question. And technology has given us no excuse but to present perfect proposals. The desktop publishing option, though, is very important when you have space considerations. A lot of times there are strict limitations on how many pages each section of a grant can be.
Right.
And desktop publishing gives you a few more options on how to get all of your data onto a particular space. In this case, I didn't necessarily need that, so I stuck with the word processor.
But you also counted your words, I'll bet.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if you don't count your words and you go over, and there's a word limitation, then you are in trouble.
I think it was you that once told me that 60% of all federal proposals are tossed out immediately because of errors in following the directions. And certainly in errors of length and word counts, this would be true.
There's one thing you haven't talked about in this presentation, and that's the grammar and punctuation aspect. And you and I both know that if you can't read what's there, no matter how well it's written, if it's not clear and deliberate, then the readers are not going to evaluate you very well. Right. How did you take care of this?
Certainly, I used a grammar checker, a grammar check program on the text. And what this tells you are basic reading levels, difficulty scores for what you've written. And I think it's true that most people reading proposals read at an 8th grade reading, as do most people in America read at an 8th grade reading level. Right. And anything over that, you're really, depending on what kind of proposal it is, you're challenging their ability to understand. And I mean this in a positive way. A technical proposal to the National Institute of Health will obviously have a higher reading level, higher syllables per word.
And different vocabulary.
And different vocabulary. Mm-hmm. You have to keep in mind that the people who are reading your proposal come from certain backgrounds. A person reading a national service proposal is going to be a social worker, potentially, a teacher, a nonprofit administrator. And you have to look almost at the publications that they're used to reading. And you can almost take, and you taught me this trick once, take a publication, a common publication that a reader would read, put it through a scanner, put it through a grammar checker, and come out with the average reading level for that presentation.
I'm not sure we should tell them that, though.
Good point.
Matt, it comes down to this. You've used an incredible amount of technology to put a grant together, a grant proposal together. Word processors, graphics, spreadsheets. I'll ask you one last question. Is it possible to really write a grant these days without using all this technology and really do an effective and efficient job?
The days of typewriters for grants are over, even in the ways of filling out forms. I have had a grant, I've been working on a grant recently that required me to fill out 100 pages of forms. By using computer technology, this probably cut at least 50 hours out of the process for me. There are certain form software that's available where you can scan in government forms and fill them out right on your screen and edit them and improve their performance. And that's just one tiny area where computer technology helps you.
I think if you put it all together, technology and grant development is here to stay. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Throughout this whole show, as we mentioned, Dialogue Corporation has provided a grant to us to research every single show. Constantly throughout the show, some of you who have been viewing us have noted that the bibliography has changed considerably, and it has. And the reason is that the unfortunate or fortunate part about technology is it seems to change all the time. That's important. Dialogue has a very particular subset dealing with grants, gifts, and foundations that really looks at thousands of possibilities for those of you who want to develop the private sector. But then there's the whole public sector. When Matt Grossman was talking to you, he was talking about public sector funds, that is funds from the United States government. And we're very fortunate today to have with us Jerry Varner. Jerry is here from the Catalog of Federal Domestic Assistance. Jerry, I've had a long-term relationship with the Catalog and with Bob Brown, your director. And over the years, as I've taught a course in competitive proposal writing, Bob Brown has been very, very helpful and very supportive in some of the things that he's done. One of the things that has happened in the last few years that I think has made a substantial contribution in exposing the kinds of opportunities for domestic funding that we have in the United States to everyone is the catalog. And I know that you have been very integrally involved in developing an automated system. And I will tell you that I've noticed as I've used what you call the FAPR system, over the last several years, that I've noticed a constant improvement in being able to search and to access information. Could you tell us a little bit about how the FAPR's system is really organized for automation and the kinds of things that you feel we need to have about the catalog that would help us to understand this whole process?
Thank you. I think that a good knowledge of the catalog is very helpful when you start out with FAPRs. FAPRs has been around a long time. It started with the Department of Agriculture, and we've gradually built it up. Dialogue had it for a while, and a number of other organizations in the private sector. But we handle it ourselves now. It's provided, all you need is a modem, a PC, a computer, and your software, communication software, and you can dial into an 800 number. Mm-hmm. And there's an annual fee of $50, but you can do all sorts of different types of things with it, like category searches, keyword searches. It's a very sophisticated keyword search. You can do an info utility, which allows people to access certain types of information and give it to various other people within their organization that might be interested in it. We're in the process right now of upgrading the system again, and one of the things it's going to have is a front end bulletin board, but it's also going to have a little tag that you can put on this info command that says, "This is furnished by such and such. Call me if you have any questions or additional need about this sort of thing." So a college could send out the information to a department. They get the information and call the person back and go from there. And
so what it does is it provides immediate access if someone has a particular area of interest to that particular person in the grant program, so that they can talk to them and find out more about it.
right.
That's a very nice thing. What about updating, Jerry? How does that work?
Well, the catalog is updated twice a year, and FAPRS is updated twice a year, except for we have a Federal Register abstracts that we put in the FAPRS section, and that's updated every month, and that deals with we do a search of the Federal Register, and we look for any programs that have new deadline dates, that have that are new programs or major program changes, and we list them, and there'll be 30 or 40 every month probably, and these people can check them out, see if they're applicable to them. It tells them a contact telephone number in addition to the program number, and of course all the information that would allow them to find it in the Federal Register. So they can go to the Federal Register and look up the detailed information then.
They can print that out too, can't they, Jerry?
Right. And this sort of complements. We consider this a complement to the catalog because there are new programs coming out every day. There's program changes happening, and the catalog is always going to be a little bit behind because it's a hard copy, and FAPRS is going to be published at the same time. It's going to be a little bit behind. So this gives you a chance. This gives you a chance to catch up on that.
As you look at the future of what it is you really want to do, tell me about what's going to happen to FAPRS and this whole automation concept. I know you've been doing a lot to really bring it up to date.
Well, it's very important for us to provide this information to as many people as we can. And that's why we brought the diskettes that Mr. Grossman was talking about. That's why we put it on the internet in a minimal sort of way, but it is on there. And that's why we are expanding FAPRS, because we find people who do not have access to internet. This is a very useful tool for them. It's even going to have a method of allowing them to send messages to us back and forth about if they're having a problem trying to find a search, if they're trying to find a funding assistance and they can't find it. They can send in and say, "Hey, I'm trying to find money for trikes for kids and I can't find it," as an example. And anybody have any success in doing this sort of thing? And the whole community, this club, I like to think of it as a FAPRS club, and the whole club can support everybody else that's within this organization, and it's a very dedicated group to a very specific interest.
It's all over the United States, Jerry?
All over all 50 states, Guam and
Okay.
Puerto Rico.
Virgin Islands.
Virgin Islands, right.
And you mentioned earlier about access. I'd like to go back to that. From what I heard, it's really not a very expensive deal at all, is it?
Right. In the past, the prices have come down a lot over the last 5 years.
Okay.
We've progressed. By calculation a while ago, it was 75% less now than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And now we have made it, instead of charging an online charge where people have to pay while they learn, you pay an annual fee of $50, and you use it as much as you want, 1 hour sessions at a time, and as many times as you want to.
And so that's it?
That's the only charge.
And what about the search program? Because are you continuing to work on that to make it accessible to people who do want to search it? Is that being changed at all? So when you get online and look at it, you can access what you want very quickly and efficiently?
Well, the keyword in the category search capability is always, I consider it very good.
Right.
And I think the more you know about the catalog, of course, the better it's going to be for you or for anyone else. And quite frankly, like a subject index of a catalog is also a very good index, but we have a keyword index within it. But it's always been a fairly easy system to use, and I think all we're doing is adding little things like the email messages,
right,
and the tags, and some of the talk facilities. There is a new feature that we've got called Talk, where if you do a search and it didn't work out the way you wanted it to, you can put a comment in it and it'll fed to us directly. I'm not sure how much we're going to use that, but it is available.
But it is available.
Right.
You don't announce it though, right? Do you feel that as a result of this, more people, Jerry, are going to really understand exactly what the federal government provides?
Oh yes, I think so, and I think it's going to be. The thing that I like about the new FAPRS program is that they can learn on the system without paying additional charges. They
Right.
can learn at their leisure, and they can become experts at it. And I think people who have to pay for it and they're worried about every second they're on it, how to make the most use of it, sometimes don't stick with it, or they can have a lot of problems with it. But I think now we have something that they can really use.
Is there a limited number of lines or to get into? Is there a problem getting on or certain times? I mean,
Well, we're going to keep it open at least 23 hours a day. And this is not like a bulletin board in the sense that, in the sense that you just go on and view it. There's interaction and that sort of thing. We're restricting people to 1 hour usage. And we are prepared to expand it rapidly if we need to.
but there's still plenty of opportunity for people to get online and not worry about waiting to get on.
Well, we haven't started using it yet. It's going to be available.
When
It
does
goes on
start?
board 2 weeks.
Oh,
but
what's the date on that?
well, that'll be May 15th is going to be the test, and June 1st is going to be going.
Well, one thing about this show is we've always been ahead of all the things that are out there, and once again we're ahead of the new FAPRS system when it comes
Right.
online, and we think that's a great way to have access to what people really need to have in the whole system. When the federal government changes, how long does it take before some of the new policies seem to come into the FAPRS system?
Well, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert that I did any analysis on this, but our feeling was, for instance, when President Clinton took over, a lot of people expected immediate change. A lot of people thought it would happen after 6 months. And these things do happen, but they take place gradually. And there's probably a lot of new Clinton administration policies that'll be showing up in this next catalog, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
that's great.
Yeah.
So, but it takes a year or 2 years sometime before policies
happens
really
gradually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And new programs come online and other programs are phased out.
Right.
What about the access in the area of technology? A long time ago when we first got in this, we talked about some new programs that could relate to technology. Are there more and more programs as an expert in the catalog that you think are going to allow the use of technology?
Well, the Department of Energy has been very supportive of a lot of high technology products, and there are other agencies that
like
are
the
also,
National Science Foundation.
right.
Well,
Yeah. There's a lot of them within it. A lot of special programs, right?
okay. If you had to advise people who wanted to get on the FAPRS system, could you tell us what we would have to do to get on, Jerry?
Well, if they're already familiar with the catalog, because I do push them to have some understanding of what the catalog's about before I tell them to jump into the system. It's a very simple thing to do. It just, as far as what equipment, I've discussed what equipment you need, and just to send us a letter with the $50 up front. And we will send a user manual that describes what they need to do, and they can
And they're
get
on.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. What speed can they go on with?
Up to 9,600.
They can?
Right.
Okay. Do you have both a 96 and a 2400 baud lines?
No, it bounces down to 24.
It bounces down to 24?
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got that. What about the kind of computer that they would have to have? Does it make any difference?
Not really. We've probably, whether it's Mac or IBM compatible, it doesn't really make any difference.
So what you're basically saying is, if we're interested in information on federal domestic assistance programs, then it's really no problem for us to do this. Now, I realize, Jerry, that not everybody, this is not going to be of interest to everybody who's out there. But if you're in the educational sector and you're in the public sector and you're interested in grant money for any variety of the programs that are there, then the catalog of federal domestic assistance is the place to begin to really look for your money, isn't it?
That's right.
And I would like to add one other thing I think is very important. I've worked with catalog now for years. And I have found that even if I couldn't get money, I could always get advice. And using the catalog to access to people who really could provide that advice was a very important thing indeed. And so for me, it has always served two very distinct purposes. And I think, I hope you would convey to all the people at the catalog what a great job they've done in opening up this incredible public service on what we have in the United States to provide assistance to all the people. Thank you very much, Jerry.
Thank you.
In the grant development process, one of the most important things you need to be concerned with is actually writing the grant and putting all of the major elements of that grant together. You've got boilerplate, you've got your basic ideas, you have information from experts, you may have computer programs, you may have a spreadsheet. All of these things have to be assembled quickly and efficiently in order to be competitive in this whole process. Up to now, it has been a very difficult and time-consuming process. But there may be some possibilities due to the improving technology that may make this whole process easier than ever before. We're very fortunate today to have with us Bill Fawkes, who is the business manager from Integration Technologies Group Incorporated here in Falls Church. Bill, your corporation has done some really amazing things in the area of voice recognition that we feel would help the entire proposal development process in applying for grants. Can you show us the software that will facilitate the grant development proposal process?
Sure, be glad to. What I'll be showing you is a product called Dragon Dictate made by Dragon Systems in Newton, Massachusetts, and we use it for building proposals by using boilerplate. Voice console, wake up, foundation letter, new paragraph, today's date, take a letter, open address book, search for Heather, search for take address. Dear Heather, colon, new paragraph. This is a demonstration of speech recognition technology coupled with grant and foundation applications, period. Go to sleep. What we'll do now is I'll call up a boilerplate paragraph by using the word grant letter. Voice console, wake up, grant letter. Decline paragraph. Go to sleep. The first paragraph is just telling them about our foundation, and the second paragraph says we respectfully decline to grant you this grant. Now what we might do is have a paragraph that says we accept your proposal and will grant you money. Voice console, wake up, accept paragraph. Use paragraph, close letter. Go to sleep. As you saw, I could dictate word for word, or calling up voice macros, bring boilerplate to the screen, such as a grant letter that says we accept and will offer you money, and then a use paragraph saying what we want you to use the money for. Then when I said close letter, I close my letters the same way every time by saying, thank you for your interest, sincerely, William Fawkes.
And all the boilerplate and the macros are stored within the system, and you activate them by a voice command.
Absolutely, by a simple voice command designed by the user. And this is a 30,000 word vocabulary, so virtually any command they'd wish to use, they can tie to a paragraph, a series of paragraphs, or a page of text.
What is the long-term number of words that this thing will be able to recognize?
This product currently has 30,000 word vocabulary, but they also make that is to say Dragon Systems makes a 60,000 word vocabulary. With 60,000 words, that's a great many words, and most people don't need more than 30 or 60,000 words. We could also do a proposal letter. Voice console, wake up, clear screen. Foundation letter, proposal letter. Go to sleep. Here we're basically saying we would like a grant from your foundation or your organization, and now what I'll do is I'll say mission statement and request statement so that they know what we're all about. Voice console, wake up, mission statement. Request statement, go to sleep. The mission statement is boilerplate telling them about our foundation and why we want the money. The request statement, as you see, is 2 paragraphs, and that simply says, here's what we want to use the money for and why we would like to have a grant from your foundation.
I think this has a lot of use in the grant development process. Thank you very much, Bill.
Yes, sir.
Bill, that was impressive. There's nothing else I can say except use the word impressive. In the grant writing business, and I've been in it a long time, where there's such an incredible amount of boilerplate that you have to deal with, and you know that I could scan in, and even when you scan it in and you have to correct it and you have to put it in that way, if I could be developing a grant and I had all of my boilerplate ready to go, and I could call as something like a simple paragraph, and I think that's what I saw you do when you did the demo.
That's right.
You actually called a paragraph.
Sure, you can call any number of paragraphs simply by tailoring an utterance to that paragraph. In one case, I called up grant proposal or grant letter. That's a specific paragraph that I called by speaking the utterance.
Well, I sometimes utter it paragraphs, but I certainly don't get that response. How does it work? How does it all work? Because obviously it saves an incredible amount of time. And if you're writing a grant proposal and you have one of these boards and you can organize it, you could cut down the time for grant preparation to a very short period.
Absolutely. At Integration Technologies Group, where I work, we use this product to write letters, proposals, government proposals, which are lengthy, very lengthy, proposals to commercial firms, and the way we do it is by word-for-word dictation, where we simply speak the words we want to go on the letter, for example, or we call up boilerplate paragraphs, sometimes numbered paragraphs, paragraph 101, paragraph 106, each paragraph individually tailored to a specific item we want to discuss in our proposal. Sometimes it might be a maintenance proposal, other times a hardware proposal. To make that into a grant or foundation proposal, would be very simple. You'd simply make the paragraphs tailored to the grant or the foundation mission and number them or label them accordingly.
Suppose I have a tremendous amount of information out on disk, and I would like to call very discrete paragraphs or ideas that were connected with paragraphs. And I said, could I say something like paragraph 24?
Sure.
And would that bring up that particular paragraph?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, when it comes into, let's assume that I'm working in a word processor like Microsoft Word.
Okay.
And I want it, when it comes in, to be formatted in the same formatting as the proposal. Is that possible?
The way I tell people, Reynolds, is that anything you can do by keyboard, you should be able to do by voice. If you can format it by keyboard, you can format it by voice. Whether it's a WordPerfect document, a Word document, the type of software really doesn't matter, because the drag and dictate product overlays that software and allows you to drive it by voice as opposed to driving it by keyboard.
So if I wanted to open a file, just as you did, I could say open Bill Fawkes. And if I had information in there, or if I had a letter that I wanted to refer to, then it would pull me to that letter?
Sure. For example, in the demonstration I said open address book.
Right.
What that did was it opened a second segment in a WordPerfect file, a second file, so that I could go in and find from my address book a specific name and address. Then I used the search command. I said search for Heather, happens to be my daughter. And then when I found that, I said take address. So all of those things are normally done by keyboard. I simply do them by voice now using the drag and dictate software.
Okay, so you were able to identify all that information, which you identified by Heather.
Right.
And it came in the system. Suppose I wanted to do write the following kind of proposal that would contain all the elements I'm about to tell you. I would want to be able to dictate the basic research information. I would bring it in, and I'd have a series of quotes. But I wanted to dictate around that research. Do you understand?
Yes.
Okay, because that would be like my background piece. Then I would like to be able to bring in ordinary text. I also would want, in some cases, to make it the type style larger, or to make it bold. Then I would like to put in illustrations. I would like to call in graphic illustrations from other information I would have, including the spreadsheet, and I would like them all to become part of a single document. Would it handle all of that for me?
Let me ask you a question. Can you do that by keyboard today?
I can.
Then you can do it by voice. All you would have to do is call up the appropriate file, or letter, or paragraph, or illustration, and you would do all of that by voice. You could marry text to illustrations. You could take a Lotus spreadsheet and drive it by voice. In fact, that's how we do our expense reports at ITG. We call up an expense report, and then by voice we say Tuesday's breakfast, and then identify the number that was for Tuesday's breakfast if we're out of town, for example. The drag and dictate software overlays all of those programs you discussed, so that all you're doing with them really is driving them by voice instead of driving them by keyboard.
The person who has been on doing all the research on the show with me, her name is Elaine Haddock, and Elaine has she's an incredible typist. A lot of times she does repetitive things. If we could set that up, for example, to dictate, say, thank you notes to all the people who have been participated on the show, would it be just as easy for her to use the Dragon software and to dictate into that in order to call up all these letters and to produce them?
Sure. My guess is she uses macros now, WordPerfect macros if you're using WordPerfect.
She uses Microsoft Word right now.
Okay, she probably has macros in Word as well. She could do the same thing by voice and probably increase the speed with which she gets those things done, which might allow her to do other things for you. Then use her prodigious skills as a typist. She could possibly do other things.
Is it possible that as we move into the future that more and more, let's say attorneys in an attorney firm, where there's so much boilerplate, that they have to utilize and it has to be precise. A good entry-level place for a lot of attorney firms. Is this going to be used more and more?
Yes, I think so. In fact, there is a large law firm in Canada who has a site license for Drag and Dictate. There's a law firm locally in Maryland who uses Drag and Dictate to put together pleadings, wills, divorce settlements, things like that. And the reason they do it is because they're letting their attorneys be more productive with their own computer, and they're cutting back on some of their administrative staff, or what this law firm in Maryland is doing is allowing the administrative staff to do other things for the attorneys. So the attorneys, instead of using a dictating device or handwriting, can do it all by voice using their computer, and then have the secretary or their administrative help make it look good, put it into a final format.
Saves everybody a lot of time.
A lot of time, makes people more productive.
Tell me about the different levels of systems that you have.
There are basically three types of speech recognition products that Dragon sells. The first is a 5,000 word vocabulary for $695. The second is a 30,000 word vocabulary for $995. And the third is a 60,000 word vocabulary that sells for $1995. Most people use the 30,000 word vocabulary. That's a lot of words. And in large part, we may have a large vocabulary, but what we say and what we use in normal business is often repetitive, the same stuff all the time.
So you're saying that for all intents and purposes, 5,000 words could cover most of the words that you need to dictate a letter, or to?
The 30,000 word vocabulary would be the best one for a business use. A 5,000 word vocabulary might be good for instance, a high school student looking to write some papers and learn how to use a computer and voice recognition. But for a professional in a foundation, I would suggest a 30,000 word vocabulary.
That would work pretty well there.
Mm-hmm.
What about changing type styles? I saw that when you did it, didn't you you emphasize the word bold for a second?
I didn't in the demo, but you can do that. And again, all it is a function of driving the WordPerfect or Word software by voice. You can say bold, you can say block text to select text to be made bold, or underlined, or italicized.
How does it know the precise command that it has in the system? And this is still a little confusing to me. For example, ordinarily, if I were going to make something bold, I'd go through a series of keystrokes,
Mm-hmm.
and I might do it by holding a control key and then hit F5, or I might just take my mouse and click on bold. How would you do it in this system?
You said basically what we would do. It's a series of keystrokes, and it's always the same series of keystrokes. The difference is, instead of you remembering that to make something bold, you have to type in 4 or 5 different keystrokes, we tie those keystrokes to an utterance. For instance, bold text might be the utterance. Those keystrokes then are generated when I say bold text.
Do I have to feed that in, Bill?
You can, or we can do it for you, but we teach people how to do that when we give them the system.
Okay, is it very complex to train a person?
Not at all. Training is about a day, and basically that's to teach someone how to use the vocabulary correction devices properly. It's not difficult at all. And the voice macros that we use to tailor an utterance to a series of keystrokes, you do not need programming skills for that. It's very simple to do.
Is there a particular voice style that doesn't work well with the system?
No. We use this product for males and females. A lot of our users have disabilities such as cerebral palsy. It does not matter. The key is that if the user is consistent in their speech patterns, and most of us are, the product will recognize and understand what you're saying.
That's a great thing. You mentioned the whole idea of really being able to help the handicapped people that can't move around. This will open up a whole new dimension to them, won't it?
Oh my. This product is a godsend to someone who is disabled. It allows them to use a computer and be productive, whereas before perhaps they couldn't. For just a poor typist like me, it's a wonderful productivity tool. But for a disabled person, this is a wonderful, wonderful product.
I've often thought, Bill, that over the years, how difficult it's been for secretaries who had to type endless and endless pages. In this system, we could move people out of that front-end drudge that they get involved in and move them into being more productive than before. As I understand it, this would dramatically improve productivity, while at the same time increasing the whole drudgery of typing and retyping, or certainly front-end typing to get the data into the system to begin with. Let's be sure, however, that we talk about all the kind of pieces of hardware that they need to have to make this work, and that they have the correct configuration. Okay. As I understand, 486, 33 and above.
Right.
Okay. It's best to have 12 megs, but preferable to have 16 megs of RAM.
That's right.
Okay. You have to have a minimum of 40 megabytes of hard disk free in order to work with it, depending on which version you get. You need a speaker, a high quality speaker to talk into.
Microphone.
A microphone. And is there a special connection or board that goes into the computer?
You have good memory. Yes, there's a circuit board that goes into the computer that comes as part of the program. You get a piece of software, a circuit board, and a headset microphone as one package.
It all comes together.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you say the training takes about 1 day.
That's right. Training takes a day, and basically that's getting your voice file established. We ask you to read to the computer, oftentimes the newspaper or perhaps a letter or proposal that you've already written, so that the words you use in a day-to-day environment are put into the computer.
I really think, Bill, that this is the beginning of a new era for us. And I think that Dragon Systems will make a substantial contribution, not only to the handicapped, but also to the whole field of grant and project development. And you're to be congratulated for really doing the research and development on this, and for really extending this whole concept of voice recognition in the field. I think it will improve all fields of endeavor. And we thank you for making this presentation and for being part of our show. We think it's really excellent.
Thank you.
We thank you.
ED 230, Managing Computer Applications, Tape 2 of 2, GW Television.
early in the show, we asked the students if they would be developing a project that we might be able to submit for funding to a private or to a public agency. And a number of people volunteered, and out of that group of volunteers, we picked 2 people that we thought really had projects of national significance. And the first of those projects that we'd like to talk about today is one developed by Cathrine Hayes. Now, you all know Cat Hayes. Cat Hayes is the person that when you get on AOL and you're looking to have instructions, or you want to do something about the show, or you want some information, she's always there for you. But there's another part of what she does, and that is she has an excellent idea that she'd like to share with you, and we'd like to take you through the process that we've begun to go through for her and with her, hopefully to find some funds and to really make a difference in the area of adjudicated youth. Cathrine, welcome to the show today.
Hi.
We understand that there are 3 areas that you'd like to talk about with us, and one is the creation of this whole idea for the adjudicated youth. The second is searching for resources, and we sort of did a little bit of that together. And the third are the next steps. So why don't you start off and tell us, where did this idea come from?
Well, actually, I'll tell you a little bit about my idea. I'm working with a group called After School Kids, or ASK, and their mission is to provide the support that's necessary to help adjudicated youth complete their probation without rearrest. And a colleague of mine had begun working with this group a while back, and he actually did a prototype of the project that I'm proposing, which is to incorporate interactive multimedia and telecommunications technology into the activities that the site coordinators do with the kids. The site coordinators try to work with the kids to develop their self-esteem and to improve some of their scholastic skills, to work on their math or their reading. And so I wanted for them to have access to other tools to use within their workshops. They meet with the kids twice a week for the period of their probation. So that's the basic aspect of my idea. The colleague of mine that developed the basic concept has already done a prototype. He did not put the technology in hands of the students. He developed the interactive multimedia himself. He took writing and photographs that the kids had developed. They did interviews in their neighborhood. It was an organized project, but basically he put together the interactive multimedia to just see if it would work and to see how the kids would respond to it, and his results were pretty positive. I actually, though, would like the kids to do all of that themselves. I would like them to do all the work on the computer, to do all the scanning and all the development. And then our idea is to do an exchange. He now is in California, and so I would like to exchange the work they've done through telecommunications to a group in California. So they'll have an audience for the work that they're doing on the computer.
That's a good idea. This has national significance in a sense, because it's the kind of thing you could do in any location, to any other location if you wanted to. It's a good idea. Cathrine, one of the things that you and I did when you told me about the idea is we did some searches. We searched a database here at the university that had some grants, and we also did a search in Dialogue in their grants, gifts, and foundations area. And we came up with a number of sources of funding. Out of that, you picked, I guess, one or more areas that we began to look at. Can you tell us what you thought about as we went through this process?
Right. I actually felt that this project could potentially be funded because everyone right now is talking about the national information infrastructure, and I think incorporating telecommunications is a way for people to pay attention to the project, and everyone has been talking about multimedia for a while now. So I thought that the technology itself would be pretty fundable, and especially working with needy kids, inner city kids that need additional help. I guess I actually thought that the project would be pretty easily fundable. When we started the searches, we looked for, by the keyword search, I guess, which you can describe a little better since you're more familiar with it, but we looked for anything that had to do with adjudicated youth, had to do with telecommunications, with technology, and came up with a list of foundations and different organizations that had funded those types of projects in the past.
There were a lot of them too, weren't there?
Yeah, actually we did come across quite a few.
One of the things, Barry, we did is in putting this whole idea together was, Cathrine points out that we did look for adjudicated youth as one possibility, and then we got into the projects and we looked to see if there were other descriptors within each of those projects that would also uncover projects that we felt were similar to this. The advantage of this project, in my judgment, is there was nothing like it. And so this would set a brand new ideal typic project that could be used and disseminated all over the place. I didn't see anything. Did you see anything was even
No.
close to this?
And obviously the problem really would be funding. I mean, this group, ASK, is a very small group, and they do get some funding from the DC Judicial Court, and they get some funding from Georgetown, but you know, they don't have the funding to put the computers into place. And for it to really work, we would need we'd need the youth to have access to the computers and have it be in their own neighborhoods so that they could go to their community center or the church where they have their weekly meetings and get access to the computer. So I feel that it is a unique project, and I feel that the funding is one of the most important aspects, because without the funds it really can't work. And I don't want to see one computer sitting in an office over at Georgetown that one technology expert uses. I think it's most important for the kids to get access to it. And for the transparency, is the technology essentially to become transparent. I don't want it to be put up on a pedestal, like this is the one computer we have and everyone has to be very careful with it. I think it should be that they can use it and be comfortable
Get their
with
hands
it.
on
And
it.
yeah,
Sure.
exactly. And
Yeah.
so that's why the funding is so important.
Well, it seems like they would learn more also if they were
Oh.
actually using the technology rather than having someone hand it to them.
Exactly, and the exchange, that they're doing all this writing and they're taking photographs and they're trying to get a sense of themselves, and to do it themselves will help their self-esteem, and then to have an audience across the nation, I think will be very important for them.
Do you feel that this is the kind of thing that you could serve a wide audience for, Cathrine?
I think so. I think, I get very excited about the technology, and I think that you have to be careful that, some of my ideas aren't too idealistic. I don't know that it would work with every group. I mean, you need support. You need someone that, as we all know, that can support the computers, because computers can be kind of sketchy, and you would need someone that could actually work with the site coordinators, because it's important for it to be a tool that the site coordinators, the people that are already working with the youth, it's important for them to have it as a tool. And so I think it has potential for lots of different environments, but I also realize that it probably wouldn't be appropriate for every group.
But I think the importance of your project is that you are basically empowering the people, your
Right.
target audience, whether
Right.
they be students or even adults, so that they gain a skill and able to coordinate all that skill to produce something that they're very proud of.
Right, and I feel that it's very important that technology be put in the hands of a diverse group. I don't like the idea that it's going to become the differentiation between the have and the have-nots, and I think that it's important for those of us with access to resources like the searches that we've done through Dialogue to put some effort into that and to make sure that everyone is getting access to this great technology.
I like the idea of contacting all those people who have done similar projects, and to bring them into this whole new development and this whole possibility, to develop a whole new network that would basically support your project. I think that's one way to do it. And also, although Cathrine and I, Barry, basically worked on public funding and some private funding, I really think that there are a lot of computer organizations out there that would be very interested in really addressing these kinds of issues. And so one of the things that when the course is done here, is Cathrine and I are planning then to continue the research and do it that way. And I'm also mentioned that Jerry Varner, let's send a message to Jerry with a complete description of what we need to do, and let's see if Jerry can locate some federal resources for us. He basically said he would do that, right? So as soon as it opens 2 weeks from now, the first day and the first hour, Cathrine and I will be sitting at the computer and ready to get into the system and ask him questions.
Right.
So I think that's a possibility. What are some of the other next steps, Cathrine, that you'd like to take?
Well, I think that your suggestion is good, maybe to identify some projects that are already occurring that are incorporating some of the technology and trying to incorporate them into my project. First on my list really is to contact some of the foundations. I've made a few calls, and I'm not as familiar with the grant writing process, and so I need to get a little bit more up to speed on that. I have some resources that I'm going to review on how to actually put my proposal into the form that they would accept. But mainly I need to make some contacts and to learn from them what they need me to do as far as the proposal. I guess because they all have different stipulations, different forms they want you to fill out, or different, so I need to actually make those contacts and narrow down, because we did come up with actually quite a few foundations.
Yeah, more than we could possibly write to.
Yes.
Well, the key here, I think, Barry and Cathrine, is that this is a great idea. The idea of letting students have hands-on is just is key to this thing. We can't have haves and have-nots anymore in our society. There's not room for it. And working with this whole segment of the population to prevent recidivism, for the returning to the incarceration, is just not the way to do business. So this ought to really work. Thank you very, very much, Catherine.
Thank you for having me.
One of the most important things today, as we look at our world, is the business of taking care of our environment. The way to get at it, of course, is to start as young as possible and to work with children to have them make a difference in what's going to happen to the future of our world. As Bob said in an earlier conversation that we've had, if you start at that level, you can make almost anything happen when they get to be older. So we're really fortunate today to have Bob Wood with us from Florida. Bob's one of the students in the course, and he's done some amazing things in adapting this whole new area of multimedia technology to really helping youth do a better job in really looking what our new environment needs to be, and probably they're going to do a better job than anybody else. Bob is the executive director of something that's called Renaissance of Discovery. Is that right, Bob?
Yep.
And it's in Winter Park?
Winter Park, Florida, outside of Orlando.
Okay. Bob, we'd like you to tell us a little bit about the project, what it's about, and you have a clip, I believe, that shows a little bit about the kinds of things that you're doing. So what is your project?
Well, basically, when I began looking at this whole business of the environmental movement, I realized that you couldn't just take the environment as an individualized unit, and this is the environment, and it has to do with the natural world only. Environments have got to relate to much broader areas. There's environments that happen right here in the studio. There's environments that happen in our own lives, and there is ultimately the natural environment. And I began to realize that as society has progressed, the environmental movement has become a part of the educational process. Little children today know more about what it means to be a part of the environment than you or I do, because it just wasn't an issue. I began to realize that that was the key building block to a much bigger educational philosophy. And so I've dedicated a good portion of my research and study to take that building block, take that philosophy, and develop an educational methodology around it. I have the first clip, which will really set up the conversation nice. It really shows the mission statement for the project and where it's going, and then we can take the conversation from there. If we could go ahead and see that.
We live in an age of tremendous opportunity, a time when the strength of our nation is being rediscovered in the hearts of our people, and old systems of education, business, and politics are being challenged and renewed. The Cold War has ended, and a new order is now emerging. Global interdependence, environmental awareness, and new technologies are fast becoming the way of life for countries who have already begun preparing for the economy of the 21st century. The leaders in this new order will be those who can better educate themselves and their children to be technologically advanced, motivated to engage problems with creativity and resourcefulness, and insightful enough to respect the fragile diversity of all creation in the process. We live in an age of tremendous opportunity. This opportunity starts today with innovative education. Innovative education begins with a renaissance of discovery.
The name Renaissance of Discovery actually comes out of a time we began looking at, well, what is multimedia and how do we use this application of multimedia to educate people in a new way? And I began realizing that multimedia is a term that's really been stolen by the computer industry. Multimedia is something that goes way back in history. And one of the greatest times of multimedia and communication was the Renaissance. But then they didn't use computers and video. It was marble and stone and buildings. Ultimately, the technology that we have today is a tool to communicate. And so if we're going to learn to communicate about the environment, the key component there is how do we communicate with one another? The three main elements that were set up in that clip were that, one, we need to be technologically advanced if we're going to retain the leadership role in the world as the most progressive and creative nation ever to have existed. Number two, we need to make sure that we educate our young people to be creative problem solvers at all levels. And ultimately that deals with communications and how to be creative and how does creativity, where does it come from and how does it work? And ultimately it all has got to come back to the environment. So that's, the idea really started out of the environmental movement, but it's grown much, much broader and much bigger. That is actually the seed core philosophy of a much bigger program and approach to education.
So you're combining the use of technology and environment and just lifestyles and diversity in your program.
Yeah, exactly. It's really taking three very simple elements: environmental awareness, creative problem solving, and high technology, and putting them together to begin an educational philosophy that borrows on the traditional education. You begin tapping in history, math, science, other forms of traditional education, but using a new philosophy. The objective of this project is really to challenge the way we educate children, the way we learn. And so we've got to begin looking at new ways of coming to utilizing information. We can no longer just have information for information's sake or knowledge, but what are we going to do with this information? And how are we going to be creative with that information? And how is the information going to be used in a responsibly creative way that will not impact the environment in a negative way? So that's where the environmental component comes into it.
You've had a lot of success so far in working with youth, haven't you, Bob?
I think that's the beauty of it. I was talking to Barry earlier, and I was saying how much fun it is to do this project, because it's a passion, and those long nights where you're working on this stuff, and then you get with these kids, or you get with adults. We even do this with businesses. I've done it with bank executives and across the board. And it's fun. It's a good time because it's education from a different perspective. And so I began using bits and pieces of this over the past 10 years in different projects that I've been involved in. I came to your program in this class when I realized I wanted to tap into the technology side, not only to utilize it in my presentations, but to begin to use it in the program as one of the basis that the technology actually becomes the centrifuge. It becomes integrated into all the other curricula. In order to do that, I realized I had to go to a source of good information, and voila. There's no one else doing this stuff, let me tell you.
Well, is this the kind of thing that could be put in any school district in the United States?
Ultimately, yes. I think as we designed it, we realized that most teachers are so busy with the work that they have to do, and we didn't want to design another program that they had to go through these hoops. There's more hoops. Oh, great. Now we have another criteria we have to meet. Instead of educating our children, now we have to worry about being their parents and being their therapists and being all these other things. So we decided to actually design it so that it works with the teacher, and the teacher can use it as the basis to launch their curricula from. The problem with traditional education, though, is that it's done in what's called the industrial base way of educating. The bell rings, you have an hour's class. The bell rings, you go to the next hour. You go to the next hour. We don't learn that way.
It always used to work for me, though, Barry.
That's part of our problem, man. That's part of our problem.
So actually, yeah, it could work in the public schools, but really I think where we're going with this is actually creating a new way of educating, which is based on a holistic model of education, which integrates these things.
But basically, you're using it as your bottom layer here, the use of technology to make it easier for people to learn, like using video clips of the rainforest and using sight and sound and touch and feel from the technology perspective to allow people to learn better or more diverse.
I don't think we could have had a better segue to this next video, Barry, and you.
And I haven't even.
And you haven't even seen it yet. If we could roll that next clip, that really
illustrates how technology can lead us back to the environment and the Earth.
During a space flight, the psyche of each astronaut is reshaped. Having seen the sun, the stars, and our planet, we become more full of life, softer, begin to look at all living things with greater trepidation, and begin to be more kind and patient with the people around you. I have been in love with the sky since birth. And when I could fly, I wanted to go higher, to enter space and become a man of the heights. During the 8 days that I spent in space, I realized that mankind needs height, primarily to better know our long-suffering Earth, to see what cannot be seen close up, not just to love for beauty, but also to ensure that we do nothing to bring even the slightest harm to the natural world. In space, I see myself as one more person among the millions and millions who live on Earth. Inevitably, this makes one thing clear about our existence and the way in which we live. We must learn to enjoy and share our short lives as fully as possible. It seems to me that even the wisest philosophers of Renaissance, the most daring minds of the past, could not estimate the real size of our planet. Earlier, it seemed immeasurably great, almost infinite. Only after the middle of this century did we, having gone up and above the Earth into space, see with surprise and disbelief just how small the Earth really is. Some saw it as an island in a limitless ocean of creation. Some compared it to a spaceship with a crew numbering more than 6 billion. The white, twisted clouds and endless shapes of blue in the ocean make the hum of the spacecraft systems, the radio chatter, and even your own breathing disappear. There is no wind or cold or smell to tell you that you're connected to the Earth. You have an almost dispassionate platform, remote, Olympian, and yet so moving that you can hardly believe how emotionally attached you are to those rough patterns shifting steadily below. All of these quotes come from astronauts from around the world who once looked out from a high onto our Earth, and through technology were able to see the beauty and the power of the creation we call Earth.
The amazing thing living in Florida is that I get to watch the space shuttle on a regular basis. And even to this day, we get so excited when you hear the sonic booms, you know what it is. It's coming in, and you run to the TV and turn it on. Or you know when it's going to lift off. And it seems like the city comes to a stop, those people who are aware of it, and they stop and they watch it. And you see people in the streets cheering. It's such an unusual thing. And for me, the power of that is that these people who are absolutely the most technologically advanced humans, they're surrounded by technology. When they go up to space, what do they say? They don't say, oh, great diodes. Oh, the meters are great. Really, the wisdom that comes out of it is that they see ourselves, they see the beauty. And I think for the first time, we can begin drawing from that wisdom and realizing that all our education has got to take place on this environment we call the Earth. And the Earth is just made up of biodiversity, of creatures and humans, and we've got to learn how to relate to these things. Not in some cosmic tree-hugging way, but in a very real 1990s, year 2000 way. We've got to begin identifying how are we going to recreate the paradigm. If we are changing in society, as we can tell that we are, where are we going, and how are we going to identify where we're going to create a better world?
It all comes down to creativity, doesn't it? And what he's trying to do is develop creative problem solving and make it part of how children view the world and this whole environment.
Well, what I think what he's trying to do is to integrate technology into the way we view the world and make us each responsible for the way we view the world and the way we treat the world, which is critical in everything that we do. You know, we talk kiddingly about all the reams of paper that we generate on the computer every day of our lives.
We do.
But we really don't discuss the impact of doing that, of killing all the trees and all that kind of good stuff, which would be, and they're coming out now with green PCs, which makes us more responsible.
I'm glad they changed the color.
No, not that kind of green PCs. But I agree, it is making us a little bit more, it should be making us more creative. It should be making us more diverse in our thinking and how we relate to our environment.
I like the idea of developing a way of thinking in the part of children that makes them and get responsible for this whole integration process. You know the thing I think we do that's wrong? We wait till somebody becomes an adult before we really try to encourage these things. And by that time, people can look at it logically, and it doesn't become part of what they are as people.
Or they tell them what they're supposed to think instead of letting them discover how to think or all the different
You
options.
used a term earlier, empowerment. And, you know, the big key word now is empowerment, problem solving, and technology. Well, all we've tried to do is take what the buzzwords are and put them into a practical curricula. What really drives me crazy is when I was doing this research, you read about this wonderful emerging age of creation. We're moving from the information society into this age of creativity. And businesses like AT&T and Chrysler Motor Corporation is utilizing creativity to come up with new products, and they're doing it very successfully. The issue comes, though, well, how do we get there? And in all my research, I couldn't find a real practical methodology, and so I decided, well, how do we get there? So I decided to contribute as a map maker on one way, one idea on how we can get to this place that business and sociologists and educators are telling us we're going. I would like to help with this project develop a way to get there. And so once you have the environmental awareness key foundation, the next thing you build in is the creativity. Even before you get to the technology, even before you sit in front of the computer, first you have to have that sense, that mystery of life, that sense of allness of the earth. Next you have to move into creativity, because ultimately all this technology is lovely, but it's the old saying, garbage in, garbage out.
Well, and it's a tool. It's nothing else. That's all it is a tool to help you achieve those other objectives.
And I think because you guys are in that business, you understand that better, but a lot of people see it as a panacea, as the technology, and multimedia is like the latest buzzword. Well, what is multimedia but just an integration of some different components that have been placed together? A very important application, but only useful insofar as that it's creative. And so now we move to the next part of this philosophy and methodology. How do you begin developing creative thinkers and creative problem solvers? And I'd like to roll another clip that I brought. It's very short, and I'd like to kind of do a segue into it to explain that this is actually one of the methods we use to educate. It's very much an MTV-style, upbeat, fun environment when Renaissance of Discovery is happening in a retreat environment. And we can talk about that a little more later. All of the education is done interactive, and it's done to empower the students. I believe that they are not the future, they are the now. And they need to believe that they are contributors now. Now, not in the future, now, today, in their homes, in their schools, in their churches, in their communities. They have the ability to contribute right there. Well, what does creativity mean? So I asked them to sit down and watch this next clip, and it's going to come at you fast, and you have to be ready to explain what you saw. And then we group them into groups, and we do all these activities. But it's based on this next thing you're about to see. You got to watch it quick, because it's going to come at you fast. You see? What were the words?
Still in a state of shock. Everything's connected, isn't it? Doesn't matter if it's technology
will
or...
affect tomorrow.
Will affect life tomorrow.
Will affect life tomorrow.
Ultimately, and that is the foundation, I believe, of creativity. Because you can be as creative as you want, but if you're in a business situation, that creativity must be supported by systems that are economically viable and lead to an end product that is profitable and also is environmentally friendly. And so you start seeing how working with children at this level later is to the advantage of corporations. It's the advantage of business because we're trying to train people to be creative problem solvers and integrating these ideas of everything is connected. But most of us don't think in systems. And so the next phase of Renaissance of Discovery is developing creativity. And we go through a whole series of activities. This is a very brief example of the areas that we get into. And we try to develop the children themselves or the participants themselves discover from within themselves where their level of self-actualization is and what are their talents and abilities and what are their unique gifts and how then do they learn to communicate those with others so that they can get to an end objective. Totally before we even get to the technology, before you even power up the PC, you have to make sure that you've got people who are connected back to a global vision, are able to feel good about themselves and have creativity and able to work with others, and now you can begin to power up this PC and look at, well, what tools are we going to use?
You know, this is one of the most powerful arguments you can have for not buying hardware first.
Yeah.
Well, you know, when he's talking here, it's reminding me of when we were talking with Computer Sciences Corporation, and they were telling us that the office worker of the future is going to be the creative problem solver and the analyst of the year 2000.
They're going to hire Bob's children.
That's right, exactly. And they're going to do exactly what Bob's talking about. They're not going to be in there, you know, typing or pushing buttons. They're going to be solving problems.
See, and this is the thing, you know, I didn't make any of this stuff up. I just read it. It's research. It's documented. It's published out there. And I realize, again, when I'm doing my research, I'm like, okay, how are we going to get there? How are we going to get there? How are we going to get there?
Well, but
I didn't see that.
Bob
so.
is a systems integrator.
That's right, a world integrator.
A world integrator. And they should be destroyed.
I'm out of here.
Pretty good, Bob. Really excellent. Good concept. Children love this, don't they?
Oh, we have so much fun. I become a big child myself when I'm involved in this because it's just so much fun to do. And I think what I really get off on is watching the children discover who they are. We keep saying children, but I must say I've done this with
youth.
Adults in business. I have done this for a bank in Florida where their little local branch needed to become more progressive and empower the employees. They ended up going from one of the lowest sales generating, money generating banks to one of the highest in the Sarasota County area. And they bring it back to the Renaissance of Discovery. It's not only for children. I like to approach the child side to it because they're more open. By the time you get to adults, it takes you the first couple hours of the retreat to get these folks just debriefed and deprogrammed from the way things are. This is how I learned. If you've ever seen the commercial Stay Between the Lines, any of our viewers who know that commercial, I love it.
Well, I only have really one question for you. Do you think you can help Reynolds?
It could take some time. I'm
Yeah.
thinking about moving to DC now.
You know what's nice? It's nice to know that inside of each person there's that sense of creativity. And if you can tap it, whether they're kindergarten children or whether they're 60 or 65-year-old retirees, there's something in each person. And if you can bring it out, if you can talk about the interconnectivity, what life is about, that's the key. You also said something else that Barry and I have been preaching since day one of this course, and that is technology is great, but it has to be preceded by a very careful analysis of what it is you need to do. Barry and I have beat on everybody about the concept. You plan first, then you worry about technology.
Because the technology, everyone puts the cart before the horse, and then you're stuck with all this stuff that you don't know what to do with, or you're underutilizing, or you really, the technology side's fantastic. I consider myself a techno junkie. I'm surrounded by this stuff. I love it. But I really believe, as you say, before you can put a child in front of it and expect them to be a great creative person, you got to do this process first. And then you can't just put them in a computer lab and give them 1 hour a day, turn on the computers to hack a little bit, and then turn it off again. The computer itself, integrated into this philosophy of education, changes the whole way we educate, which is ultimately the goal of the project down the road, is to actually design learning centers, accredited learning centers, which use this philosophy as the foundation to educate the traditional curricula.
Bob, once you create a creative process in children or youth or whatever it is, once you establish that spark of creativity, do they keep it forever?
I think that's the toughest thing. That's a very good question, because they can keep it if it is maintained. If there is external stimuli outside of, from within their environment, relational environment, to stimulate that. A lot of times though, through traditional education, we don't do that. We don't stimulate the creativity because it's inconvenient. It's difficult. What do you do with a creative child? What do you do with the child that is pushing the edge all the time? A lot of times they end up being called the EH kids, or the
problem child.
The problem
child.
Yeah,
That was me.
That was me. That was totally me. I hated traditional education. Now, a lot of educators don't like what I say because it's threatening to what they preach. But I believe that this type of methodology, once integrated into the teaching of teachers, begins to change the whole way teachers will teach. When I work with students in the local Central Florida area, education students who are a part of another project that I run for a local college down there, they just love this. They're just hammering to get involved in it, to be able to begin learning this way. To answer your question, does it stay with you? I think if you're willing to continue being connected to the environment, continue stimulating your creativity, and continue plugging away at the technology, because the technology, as we heard earlier from Cathrine, it does stimulate that creativity. If you're in front of it, if you're touching it, that you've got to fuel the fire. So somewhere we have got to be able to continue giving the stimulation to the student. Sitting in front of a TV or sitting there with a computer game is not necessarily a creative endeavor. It's an end result of someone else's creativity.
Well, when these kids grow up, or these adults go back to their work environment, it's going to be. I think it's going to be that sustains them. It's that creativity. It's that idea that they have gotten something and have developed something on their own.
And they
really
take ownership.
Yeah.
And if you go to work and you don't have ownership of your work, you're just another drone. And after a while, you burn out. And if you're burnt out, you're not affecting the company in a positive way. Everyone talks team. Well, how do you create a team? You've got to have a group of individuals who are working together, who are self-motivated, and who feel self-worth from what they're doing. And from there, you can create environments that are productive, that can create products that make people feel good about themselves. So we're really changing the whole way we even look at industry with this.
One of the
step
things,
by step.
if I had to put it all together, I would have to say Bob has, we call him a systems integrator, as I said, but it's really more than that. It's a person who has created an opportunity for just everyone to really look at themselves and to look at the environment and to put it together in a way that, the only way perhaps, that makes sense for what technology is doing to this world. And he's put all these pieces together. What a great thing. And Bob, we really wish you an incredible amount of success in this.
Thanks for having me.
Throughout this entire course, we've tried to look at things that really would make a difference in how you plan for technology. If you don't plan for it, and plan for it pretty carefully, it doesn't seem to work real well, and you tend to make a lot of false starts and, quite frankly, make a lot of mistakes. We've tried throughout the 15 sessions to give you principles and ideas and steps and research and other information that we feel would really help you. The missing ingredient, that is the secret weapon in all this, is our students. And we have really been very, very fortunate. And one of our secret weapons, a person that's been on chat room almost consistently with us, is Amy Bishop from Maryland. Amy, really appreciate you taking the time to come and meet with us today. And we've asked Amy, as you know, Barry, to talk a little bit about the kinds of things that she was able to come up with, to uncover, that would really make a real contribution to her as she carried out her planning. Amy, what kinds of things did you come up with that you felt really made a difference?
Well, there was 4 main points that I came up with. The first one being the America Online service. I found that it was very, very helpful in being able to communicate with you all as well as communicating with the other students. The capabilities of being able to send messages with a little bit of confidentiality and having you respond back. I actually got a response one evening before I ever signed back off.
That was a mistake, I'm sorry.
Won't do that again.
But I was very impressed. It was like the first couple weeks of class, and I was like, well, this is good. And I got my response and was able, to call back or, send back another message. So that was real helpful. Even though we had to, pay money to have the AOL service, it still wasn't as expensive as a textbook would have been, but so much more beneficial, I thought. Having to be able to interact with you and the other students, having the online services such as the magazines and things like that. So I felt that America Online was very beneficial to the course, especially for the kind of project we were doing.
Well, we really liked it when you came on in the chats we had every single week. And we felt that you really did a good job with that. And Amy Bishop kept appearing, remember? And
Consistently. We finally had to adopt her.
We signed the adoption papers for Amy to. If I remember correctly, one night we said, "Okay, your name now is officially."
Amy Bishop, Prokop, Ferrante.
That's it. That's right. And I think
your name went last, so you could buy her dinner.
I see, and I haven't told my wife yet, though.
Well,
okay.
These things happen.
But she was on the weekly chats and very, very helpful. And were they helpful to you, Amy?
Yes, very much so. First of all, they were really informal, which was nice. I felt as comfortable on the first session as I did on the last one. The good thing about it was you didn't have to be right in there, at the very beginning. You could jump in the middle and pick up right where, everybody was and just jump in and say, tell me what's going on. And somebody would message you in and say what we were talking about. So that was very helpful. The idea of being able to throw out questions and having responses either from you and also from other students. The other thing I found with the chats was if you put a question out there, that if somebody out there didn't know it, you might get a message a couple days later. They have found it for you or located it for you or found an article or something. So the chats were extremely helpful to me. And then when Barry started putting them in the library, you could go back and read them. Sometimes we got going really fast in chat and you could miss a good key point. And so it's nice to be able to go back and read them and pick up on some of the things you might have
you can
missed.
actually scroll back as it goes on and you can do it.
Yeah.
And you downloaded them too, I guess.
Oh yeah, I printed them off and read them some other times or went back and looked at different things that people may have talked about.
That means whatever we said we recorded permanently in history?
Oh yes.
That's right.
I did some selective editing, don't worry.
Even the adoption stuff.
Well, you mentioned that when we were talking on the phone, which incidentally we did use the phone on occasion.
Yes.
One of the things that Barry and I tried to do throughout this whole series is to talk to people on the phone. Mm-hmm. And I was hoping to get to everybody. And I know the first time I called you on the phone, you said something like, "Who?" But that was helpful. But in talking to you, you talked about online databases.
Right.
What impressed you, or what was important to you about that?
Well, in my situation, I work for the community college in Salisbury, Maryland, and we're building a new campus with a media center. And we're having a, quote, bookless library, and we're going to have several multimedia stations. And the online databases sort of gave me the thought of some of the different things that the students could have access to for their research, or the faculty or administration could have access to for research or projects or for class lectures and things like that. Things I wasn't really aware of that were out there. So it gave me some thoughts to fuel the fire and jump back in and tell some of the ones at the college, hey, we can do this, or this is out there and this is available.
You think it
So
worked?
that class, I hope, that class really stuck in my mind probably above all of them, just as being something that helped me right away.
It was important for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Amy, why don't you talk a little bit about the strategic management plan? You probably know that when we started that, Barry and I we had 99 students, and we had 120 messages in one day asking us, what is this animal about? And but things sort of calmed down over the time frame as they got into it. How did this impact?
Actually, now we're not hearing anything. I wonder why.
I'm very concerned about this, Barry.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to all this?
Well, I found the strategic management plan an animal, to say the least. I was very overwhelmed at first. The thought of having to do this, and then the outline that y'all sent, I was like, oh, I don't know about this. But I found as I sat down and did some actual planning and did some research that it was very helpful in kind of conquering. It's like a divide and conquer method of analyzing a program. And in my particular plan, I addressed a very small business, but I saw how much research that I did, and the more research I did, the more things I seemed to uncover. So I can imagine, like with larger firms and larger companies, and when they tackle these kind of problems, that a plan like such as this could be very, very helpful to try to keep things in line and on target and not varying, off the path there. The plan itself, helped me a lot. Hopefully it'll work. That's all I can say about my own plan. I'm hoping that it will work and do the job that I've made it to do.
Well, the important thing is the process you went through, isn't it?
Yes.
And because you're going to be repeating that process over and over again throughout your entire life in technology.
Right.
Planning precedes technology, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's the dog? The dog wags the tail? Have I got it straight, Barry?
I never know with your analogies. They change daily.
Well, we have 3 observations that we want to make. Barry and I do about the class, and that we really think is important. And you're a typical example of those observations. And one of them is that throughout this course, we've had high-quality students in significant positions who we felt could make a difference. You agree with that, Barry? I was really impressed that the one group from down in Savannah working with the Atomic Energy Commission, and Vicki Sear that I've had a chance to talk to on the phone, and the great job she's done with her school, and
Vic Case with United Way down in Dallas.
Precisely, and we could just go on, and to tell you that the students are just exceptional. And quite frankly, that their work and their kind of questions that they ask as they put their strategic management plans together has really made Barry and I feel really great. Initially, a lot of questions, and also, what is this animal out there kind of thing. But as they moved into it, as we began to respond to their email and they began to put ideas together, the messages that we got over and over again was, this is a great opportunity for me, and an opportunity to really make a difference in what I'm doing. And so we felt very, very good about that, I think.
Well, yeah, I know in some of the chat sessions you took over when you were answering someone's questions, or Anna, or Devron, or
and Deborah Papineau.
I mean, just took over the chat, and we just kind of sat back there, and you all were just, relaying information back and forth.
Which is the way it should be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the students. It was. I was very impressed with the camaraderie between students, considering we all have never laid eyes on each other. We all kind of really clung together and helped each other. And I know on several occasions I found articles and things that I thought could help other people when they, in chat we would talk about certain things, or certain problems would be thrown out, and I would find something or come across something, and I'd, send them a quick message, I found an article in this magazine or something, and they would, send back a little thank you, and it was just a real good group to work with.
One of the things in the background you didn't know about was that Barry and I, during the chat sessions, could send instant messages. Have you ever gotten instant message?
Oh, yes.
Please, I've been sending Amy instant messages the whole course.
And we could continue our chat and send an instant message.
And that was nice. And but the first time I ever got one, I was like, what was that? It was like beeped and it went on, and I was like, what was that? And then he sent me, and I wrote back that my computer was beeping, and Barry says, you got a message? And I said, what kind of message? And so I didn't know about that until he sent the first one, and then from there on out, that's all we did.
That's
well,
right.
Some of the things we were able to do with that is if somebody wanted a specific article, we could window out, we could watch the chat room as part of a window, we could go to the article, we could upload the article, and we could send it through instant mail. And nobody else saw it because it was only pertinent to that person.
Right.
And so it was a really nice thing because we could maintain the normal chat as well as have the
Well, I
internet
think,
message.
Barry, you did that with me. Not the last chat, but the one before. You sent me a couple of the chat logs
Right.
that hadn't been in the library, and I had asked them for them, and before we signed off, they were in there. And then I was telling him how impressed I was.
Well,
What can I say?
well,
I
nothing.
know how to use that now.
You know how to, you sure do. I guess the other thing is, we have found consistently that the questions the students have asked have been insightful and intelligent. Barry and I constantly are amazed at the quality of the thinking of the students and the kind of questions, kind of insightful questions we get. And rather than get tired of answering questions, you always sort of look forward to the next question, which tends to say that the relationship and the kind of thing they're asking, we feel really makes a difference. And quite frankly, we really also like to do it in a confidential way. We like the idea of having confidential inquiries and confidential responses. Students feel that they can then talk to us as they would in a classroom
Right.
on a one-to-one basis if we were having a chat in an office. We felt that that was helpful. The other point is how sophisticated the SMPs were. You need to know that we felt that they were really sophisticated. And we, as you know, we asked for prior approval of all of SMPs. And Barry and I spent a whole weekend looking at just looking at the
That
at
was
the
fun.
SMP.
That was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
Well, and we also had them on the message boards. Did you go
Yeah,
through
I
and
went
look through?
through. Yeah, because that was one of the reasons that I was able to find some articles to help people was from things they'd put out. And I had actually put a couple questions out about my SMP if anyone came across any information about some particular software. And I was overwhelmed with responses of people that had found information to help me.
Pretty nice, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
And when you have 100 students in a course and you have 100 dedicated students who are willing to help out,
That's
and you
right.
put something out there, it really is very helpful to get those kinds of responses.
Right.
And you sort of, you don't know who they are, but you like them anyway.
Yeah, and that's what I felt. There was such a closeness for people we've never met, but yet we all feel like we know each other.
Well, Barry and I developed some really close relationships as a result of this process, we feel at least. And we don't know who they are either, but it's really nice to talk to them.
Yeah, we don't have a. We would. I mean, if they came up and met us on the street, we wouldn't know who they were.
You got it. Well, there are three keynotes that we would like to just mention to you, and that is, and I'm sure we've said this, but we're going to say it again. One is that everything we did in terms of the research was kept completely up to date. And the reason and the way we did this is we had Elaine Haddock, who was working with us as a researcher for the full time, and Elaine basically spent a portion of every week, sometimes it seemed like a portion of every day, making sure that the articles were correct and the bibliography was changed and it was updated. And we feel that as a result of it, the software, the information that people provided was always where it needed to be at that moment. Of course, when we recorded a show and it didn't come in until 2 weeks later, sometimes we weren't sure if we could keep up, but at least we made a good attempt at it. In each case, we had the key people in every company who represented the product appear on the show. This was every single show. You probably noticed the president of Computer Sciences Corporation, the architecture manager for Intel Corporation, the head of program development for a Digital Equipment Corporation. In every case, it was the person who really knew the product. And of course, I need to mention David Sokolauer from Intel, who appeared on several shows and really spent an incredible amount of time to make sure that the information we had on Intel was correct. And we had some primary sponsors. Epson Corporation provided computers for the whole show. Really a nice thing. And Microsoft Corporation was a primary sponsor. And I think I need to mention Sally Jenkins, who really was supportive and helpful to us throughout the whole show, making sure that every piece of software we had was absolutely up to date for Microsoft. And we felt that way about all the software vendors, and we're just as cooperative and as helpful as they possibly could be. And these things are really important, I think, to the students, and will really make a significant difference. I guess if we sum it all up, this is what it means to us. We liked the students more than we could have imagined. We felt a closeness and kinness to them. They were good people, and they ask us questions that we didn't know the answers for in some cases, but we were able then to go to resources and getting on email, and when somebody asks you a question, rather than having to answer it in class when you can't possibly know it, and it gives you a little bit of time, makes a big difference.
Yeah, that's one thing I like about the distance education is when you don't know an answer, you can always stall them until you get the answer and then ship it right out to them.
Well, I noticed in a couple shows when Amy and Kathy and some of the others were asking technical questions, that you would get offline for a couple minutes and go into America Online and pull up the answers, and I always liked that.
You always thought it was brilliant, right?
No, I knew what you were doing because you couldn't possibly know those answers, and. I think the other thing is that Barry's is a technical arm, and I'm the management arm, and I think the combination of those two pieces, when I didn't have an answer, the students would automatically ask Barry the questions, and I was constantly encouraging them to ask more and more technical questions and less management questions.
That's funny. I was doing the exact opposite.
I figured as much. So the communication was there, and AOL was a good platform for us, we felt. It was easy to use for most of the students. Not everybody likes everything, but at least it was helpful for us. And we loved the forum and the opportunity to chat.
What do you think were the most important, one of the most important things that you think you've gotten out of the class so far? I guess it's winding down now, but just in the minute that we have remaining.
I guess the strategic management plan and the idea of planning before you purchase and planning before you buy your equipment. The idea that planning for the future as well as the present probably was the most important thing in all my situations. Usually we're like, we need this right now, so let's get it, as opposed to saying, we need this now, but what are we going to need next year at the same time? So that's probably the biggest key point that I got from the course in general.
Thank you very much, Amy. Appreciate it. We'd like to encourage our people to, and those of you who are viewing out there, to look at get a hold of us by email. We have our email addresses. And we'd also like to thank our wives, Joan Ferrante and Leslie Prokop, who really have been very significant in this show.
And we'd like to, if you email ferranteR@AOL.com and ProkopR or ProkopB.AOL.com.
Okay, thank you.
Not being able to really have a very large screen when I'm sitting and looking at that computer. You have the pen in your pocket.
You're bad, man. She's gonna come down and give us both hell.